Ark Survival Evolved is the next survival game on my list. It's actually been out for quite a while, but I was unaware of its existence for most of that time. In the end, this turned out to be a good thing because the game's developers have been pushing out new content and a lot of fixes, making the game both more stable and interesting to play. It's not surprising that a survival game of this kind is complex in nature and presents new players with a high learning curve. Since my wife and I have played quite a few of these games, we expected to be able to understand most of its mechanics on our own and ignored both the in-game guide as well as any tutorial videos on the internet. That was a big mistake. At this point, I wonder if it's just that a new game seems really complicated, or if we've really been playing the games in order of ascending complexity. In any case, this one felt like it was the hardest one yet. The reason for this is that Ark Survival Evolved features dinosaurs. This felt both refreshing and a bit off-putting at first. There are various types of dinos and almost all of them can be tamed. This is where the game becomes really complicated for all noobs. The dinos are essentially Ark's bread and butter. They have primary and secondary functions. Those secondary functions are what's really valuable about them. But the game offers only two ways of finding out about those functions. Option 1 is to tame whatever you can and essentially experiment until you figure things out. Option 2 is to explore the map and gather the randomly scattered hidden notes, only some of which will actually tell you something about the different dinosaurs. The rest of these notes attempt to tell you more about Ark's story. The issue here is that these notes are not voiced in any way. You have to literally stand there and read the note, while you could be charged by a carnivore and eaten at any point. So what most people do is take the note and move out without reading. You can read them later, but most people won't bother and I can't blame them for that. These kind of games are revolving around gathering resources, which on its own can be quite boring, so anyone will hardly want to stop and read text additionally to the boredom of gathering resources. Exploration is something that is discouraged at the beginning of the game. Even if you stay close to where you first spawned, you will realize that almost everything around you is out to kill you and that you are amongst the weakest creatures to walk the map. So if you are reasonable, your first objective will be to build a basic base and produce gear which will increase your chances of survival. This on its own can take quite some time because the most basic stuff barely improves your survivability. Most dinos will still kill you super quickly. We had the bad luck of having a Dinosaur spawn super close to our base. Naturally, we had no idea if that thing was dangerous or not, so we decided to leave it be for now. However, the darn beast kept roaming around our base and found it. At this point, all hell broke loose. It began to break our base and all attempts to fend it off were pointless. This dinosaur is super fast, very strong and extremely aggressive, although it is actually a herbivore. It took a while, but in the end we died many times to it, our base was demolished and we were returned to the first grade. It was a very frustrating experience and also the first time I found myself forced to read about a particular dinosaur online and especially on how to deal with it. That's when I found out about its usefulness when tamed and began to truly understand how the game is actually meant to be played. You see, until this very moment I was getting pretty frustrated about the insane amounts of resources required to build anything. The game seemed even more grind heavy than No Man's Sky, and that's saying something. It turns out there are dinos which, when tamed, can be used to gather tons of resources in a very short time. This is how the game actually intends for you to play it. Start, get to the basic recipes for taming dinos, and start taming as soon as you can. It's an absolute game changer and makes the grinding almost fun. The dinosaurs are tools, but instead of crafting them, you get to tame them. So my wife and I divided the responsibilities, and while she was building and planting, I was off taming dinos, building elaborate traps in order to tame even more dinosaurs, and then bringing in tons of resources thanks to that. The game was beginning to be fun now that I understood it better. So for the most part, your progression will be more about your dinosaurs than your character. Your character does still level up and unlock more recipes, however he will never really feel overpowered when alone. Even at the final stages of the game, having no tamed dinos around you would still leave you in significant danger. This is something I dislike about the game. Dinosaurs are awesome and all, but they are big, they have bad pathfinding, and are super hard to coordinate when in large groups. The cool thing is that each creature has an assigned gender and reproduces with a creature of the opposite gender. You can essentially tame a male and female dino and then have them mate in order to create a third creature of the same kind with similar stats and appearance. The dinosaurs in the game come in different color patterns and different stat affinities, so you can use this to create better dinosaurs with each next generation that you produce. It's actually quite fun to play God and practice some selective breeding. Let's get back to talking about the character. You get to customize your character and pick such things as gender, skin color, hair color, etc. But the customizations are very limited. What is super cool is that your beard and hair will grow continuously, and you can create scissors to trim those. There are also ways to learn new beard and hairstyles, then you can cut your hair and have it grow in that hairstyle afterwards. That feature is pretty cool. The game features no real nudity, unless if you use mods. I found that to be a bit disappointing because it's simply an interesting addition and makes for some funny moments, especially in multiplayer. I find nudity in survival games to somehow contribute to the realism and generally to be a fun and fitting addition. In any case, there are many reasons to wear clothes, no matter how primitive those are. The main one being the fact that they offer some protections from attacks as well as from hot and cold weather. The climate is one of the most important things to consider because your character will get more hungry and thirsty depending on the temperature he is in. Not to mention that hatching fertilized eggs is also something that demands an environment with proper temperature. Your character will need to eat and drink regularly in any case if you want him to survive, even if the temperature is perfect. He also has limited stamina and will have to take breaks if you perform any action too many times. You can keep an eye on your character's status by looking at the right corner of the screen. This is also where I want to mention the various status effects and buffs in the game. You can gain buffs by doing things, and you can gain debuffs. One statistic to consider here is torpidity. This stat determines when your character, or another creature as a matter of fact, is going to lose their consciousness and pass out. It's essentially for taming most dinosaurs, and it is also how you will be killed many times. Some creatures such as the titanoboa, for example, have a poisonous bite which will make you pass out really quickly. The next issue here is that while you are out, the stupid snake will keep biting you, making sure that you are permanently knocked out. So essentially it's a stun to death situation unless you have someone with you who can kill the damn thing. There are many such cheap deaths, and you will probably learn about them by trial and error. What's made worse is that the game does not explain anything about the buffs and debuffs you receive. All you see is a cryptic symbol appear on the right side of your screen with no explanation what it does. If you want to know, you need to read about these symbols online, and then you might be able to understand what the effects of these are. You just generally know, oh, this is a bad thing or this is a good thing. This is something I see done quite often in these kind of games, and I wonder why the developers think it is okay to do so. The community should not be the only source of information when it comes to these things. The same can be said about the story. It's best to go online and read in forums in order to understand what is really happening in the game. It's just not realistic that you will find all those scattered hidden notes and read them all in the correct order just by chance. The story is actually somewhat interesting, if only we didn't have to literally look for it all over the place. A player who does not read online or watch YouTube videos dedicated to the story of the game will almost certainly never really know what the true story of the game is about. That is just poor storytelling, and I don't approve of it at all. But since I did mention the many ways in which you can die, I want to also address that there is no map indicator of where your corpse is. If you die, you need to find where you have died on your own. But you don't actually know where that is. Once you get close enough, you can see a beam of light in the sky at that point, but that's only when close enough. Oftentimes you will be within a forest so dense that you cannot actually see the sky, and therefore the beam of light is useless. Not to mention that there are other beams to see as well, adding to the confusion. The game features random drops all over the map, which can have materials in them or random items. It's a matter of luck really, but the problem is that these also produce beams into the sky which can confuse you additionally. The best way to know where your body is to actually write down the location's approximate coordinates on a piece of paper and then go on a search once you resurrect again. That is of course if you want to receive your items back. The crafting in this game is interesting, although it has many problems. One of the main ones is that building structures is very limited. Remember how you have so many different types of tiles in Conan Exiles, allowing you to build almost any form of structure you like, with any complexity. Well, here the selection is very limited, and to make things worse, placements of the structures are often denied by the game for no apparent reason. I've had many cases where I can place a ceiling all over the place with the exception of one spot, which then would have to be left open because the game simply doesn't want it for some reason. You could place one there, but it wouldn't snap to the other one, so it would be slightly to the side or lower or higher. It's just no way of making it perfect, and quite honestly, who wants to build a floor in which you have one tile that is sunken half a meter? It's just ridiculous. Making the whole structure so much uglier at that. The devs did add a very useful feature. You have a short amount of time to pick up any structure without destroying it if you react fast enough. This way would allow you to move things that don't sit right or that were misplaced because you misclicked. The problem is that this timer is really short, and oftentimes you can't know if the result will be good unless you place several things, and by then it's too late to pick up the first one that you placed before. That's when you find yourself forced to demolish something. So you place 3 tiles. Now you see, aha, when I place all these 3 tiles, it doesn't quite look the way I want it to. So I'm gonna pick them back up, but the timer for the first one has already ended because that was the first one placed. So you can only pick up 2 tiles and you have to demolish the third one. You do get some of your resources back, but it's of course not the same amount you spent. Another problem comes with a lack of flexibility in general. Take water pipes for example. You would think that you can place a pipe in any direction you like, but you cannot. There are several shapes you can produce, and they are placed in rigid ways. There's no option to place the pipe slightly tilted to the right, for example. This makes for some really ugly piping systems because you only have pipes that go tilted up, straight up and down, vertically. You have a X situation pipe that you can place to turn pipes left and right. It's just horrible. It looks really ugly and it's difficult to make it look appealing. If you want to build foundations in the air, you will need pillars. This has been seen in many other games, but in this one, unless you start with the pillars and then build things on top of them, you will have pillars sticking out of your floor, which means, for example, you build some kind of a floor that is slightly elevated and above the ground, and you want to extend your house forward, the second floor, for example. You cannot do that unless you have some kind of foundation, but since there's no floor below it, you gotta build a pillar to act as foundation. However, since you built the house first and the pillars are coming now afterwards, you can do this, and then it will allow you to place a tile, but the pillar's length will stick out through the tile. It's a bit difficult to explain, but it's pretty stupid. If you start with pillars, you can build tiles perfectly on top of them, but if you build pillars after already some have been placed, it looks ugly and crazy. There are whole videos online about this problem, and people have figured out ways to circumvent it, and those ways are to simply start with the pillars first. And pillars are expensive, they never sit right, so I don't want to talk too much about pillars, but this gives you an idea of how most of the game's building is rigid and not willing to adapt to the player's desires. The game starts with primitive technology and advances to future tech. You will know that this is the case early when you first encounter your first tech dinosaur. Dinosaurs have a low chance to spawn as cyber versions of themselves. They look pretty cool and are an early indication that you will be able to go into futuristic technology later, because obviously there's a robo dinosaur in front of you. So, although players cannot make themselves robo dinosaurs, you know that this is some futuristic crazy shit happening here. The jump from primitive to future tech feels way too sudden, however. I understand that balancing this would have been hard, but it feels like there were no attempts to do so in the first place. Most people will end up building their first industrial fabricator in their stone base, or even wooden one, probably right next to some torches. That's how it was for me, at least. It also felt like there were a lot less recipes for stuff here than, for example, in Conan Exiles, which does not go into the future. This issue feels even more obvious with the advancement of the technological era. There are a number of recipes in total, but not that many within the individual technological ages. One moment you are using a slingshot, the next you are holding a rifle. There are also very few types of equipment. The best pick and hatchet are the metal ones. Those are also the second types of tools you get right after the primitives one made of stone. So that means you got a stone hatchet, then you got a metal hatchet, and that's it. You go into the future tech, but you're still chopping stuff with your normal metal hatchet that you had while you had a stone castle that you built, a stone structure. It's true that after this you are actually expected to use tamed dinos for resource harvesting, but it feels like there should have been more regardless. When it comes to exploration, the game both rewards and punishes it. If you decide to explore on foot, you might as well jump off a cliff. Ark does not want you to walk around on foot. The waters are full of dangerous fishes. The lands are roamed by carnivores of all sizes, and so is the air. The Dinosaur's AI can at times be really impressive. Some tiny dinos will only attack when in a large group. Some will steal a stack of something from your inventory and run away immediately, clutching that stolen item. So you will have to chase them down and kill them if you want to recover it. Some will hide and wait for you to pass and then suddenly charge you, pin you to the ground, and essentially kick you until you die. There's no way to get out of this one. There are many ways to be punished, and many of them work even when you ride a strong dinosaur. This aspect of the game felt very harsh to me, but also very original and different. Especially at night, the game is so dark that it can easily be mistaken for a survival horror game. The one thing I believe needs to be fixed at any cost is that even the tiniest creatures will attack you when riding dinosaurs of any kind. I'm riding a T-Rex and get attacked by dinos so small I can't even see them. It's annoying as hell, especially because almost nothing seems to want to mess with a T-Rex when it roams alone. As soon as you mount it, every creature on the map loses respect for the giant carnivore. It's just stupid. I mean, I understand I'm a weakling on top of this carnivore, but you know, it's still a goddamn T-Rex. They shouldn't be like, oh look, it has a weak spot now on its back, let's kick its ass. The game features a variety of different maps between which you can travel, but it does come with limitations. You can take a limited amount of things along the way, etc. I feel as though there should have been a more smooth way to add new content, but appreciate that it was done anyway. Each map is huge and offers lots of variety. You have several boss battles waiting for you on each of the maps, and those are difficult as hell. Each boss features 3 difficulty settings, but even the easiest one is a huge challenge and meant to be faced with a large group of tamed dinos and a few friends. One could do this in single player as well, but it would be even harder. It took us about 50 hours before we could face the first boss on the lowest difficulty and actually managed to survive the encounter. We chose not to play on a PvP server and did not form any alliances with other tribes. It was just us two, me and my wife, so that explains the slow progression we were facing, at least I assume so. Using mods can spice up the experience and ensure many more hours of playing, but we stuck to the vanilla experience because I wanted to see the game as it was intended to be experienced by the developers. It took us about 90 hours of playing before we managed to clear all the bosses of the first map and see the first ending. The other endings are achieved on other maps, which we have played as well, but haven't found the courage to challenge the bosses there yet. While I've spent the majority of the game mostly complaining about it, it was still a very fun experience. The developers have put a lot of love into the game, they've pushed more and more content out, and I've even read that more is to come yet. On top of that, there are events from time to time which also freshen things up. So the big question here is if I will recommend this game to my viewers, and the answer is a clear yes. The game is deep, and while the difficulty so far feels much higher than in any other survival game which I have played, it's unique and fun enough to make up for it. It works well in any ultra-wide resolution. As you can see, I've been playing it here in 21:9 while recording, and then also on 32:9. Both worked very well. The UI seemed to scale really nicely without the need of any additional fixes, which I really appreciate, even on 32:9 by the way. The one thing to consider is that although optimized with updates, the game is still power hungry as hell. I had to cap the frame rate to 30 FPS to be able to record this game in 21:9 without any stuttering. Other than that, I managed to hit 45 FPS at 32:9 with everything set to max, which was sufficient, but of course at that time I was not recording, so I had extra resources. I'm running the game on an i7 7700, 16GB of RAM, and a GTX 1080. My wife is on an i5 4670, 8GB of RAM, and a GTX 980 Titanium. However, she's playing the game on a 1080p resolution, so no ultra-wide, and it ran well enough and never really dipped below 40 frames for any of us. So if you are someone who enjoys these kind of games and have at least one more person who is willing to start the journey with you, go ahead and give this one a shot. It's a good game, but it takes some time to master. Just be ready for a serious challenge. I hope this video has been informative for you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, have a great day.